The Sony VENICE was announced back in 2017 and has been one of our favourite cinema cameras since. The colour accuracy of its 6K sensor is phenomenal and the image is so flexible with tons of latitude to play with. So today we're excited to check out this, the VENICE 2. We managed to get our hands on the VENICE 2 for a couple of hours over at Camera Image in Poland, though we weren't able to shoot with it unfortunately. The camera was still in beta, so things are still subject to change, and shooting around a film festival with a pre-release unit could have given away the secret for Sony. We're hoping to have more time to test and produce full reviews soon, so please subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you don't miss it. Over the years the VENICE has been on the market, Sony has slowly been improving and refining it by listening to customer feedback in an attempt to make the camera as good as they can. And this means that the VENICE is already an incredibly compelling choice for so many, but Sony has clearly upped their game with the VENICE 2, with the most immediate difference being the reduced form factor for RAW recording. A smaller form factor VENICE with the ability to record XOCN internally was something end users have wanted to see, and while the original VENICE wasn't massive, with the R7 attached it did get quite long, which made it more challenging to get onto gimbals and other stabilisation equipment. We will explore the form factor in a bit, but let's take a look at one of the biggest differences, the new sensor options. Sony has brought us with the VENICE 2 what they had promised with the original VENICE, a new interchangeable sensor block that you can easily swap. Users will have the option of utilising the existing 24.8 megapixel 6K full frame sensor used in the original VENICE, or a brand new 50 megapixel 8.6K full frame sensor, which unfortunately cannot be used with the original camera. While the current Rialto is compatible with the new VENICE 2 body and 6K sensor, a new Rialto system with the bandwidth for the new 8.6K sensor is in development. Both sensors are accurate to the 35mm format at 35.9mm by 24mm with a 43.18mm diagonal. The existing 6K sensor has a dual base ISO of 500 and 2500 and 15 plus stops of dynamic range, while the new 8.6K chip has bases at 800 and 3200 and claims 16 stops of dynamic range, which is very interesting from Sony, as usually a reduction in pixel size would lead to a lower dynamic range, so we're intrigued to get this in-house and test it out. The sensor block is still an easy 5-minute swap out, held in by just 6 screws. Sensor blocks will be available as a spare part, so you wouldn't need a whole new camera if looking to change them out. They both also run on the same firmware, so the camera will recognise which sensor is installed upon boot. We were really excited when Sony had originally announced this functionality with the VENICE, and it's great to see it happening with the VENICE 2, as it's now been a few years, and we love the idea of being able to quickly swap between sensor blocks in a similar way to how you would test and choose different film stocks. We can't wait to see what other sensors Sony will bring out for this system. One of the biggest changes with this camera is its ability to shoot XOCN internally without the need for an R7 recorder. This has helped keep the size and weight down, which was one of the main complaints about the original units. XOCN is Sony's extended tonal range, original camera negative, and aside from the necessary abbreviation, it has a 16-bit precision linear encoding while still maintaining a relatively low bitrate. As well as XOCN, the camera has the ability to capture ProRes up to 60 frames per second in 444, 42HQ, and now in 4K 17:9, 16:9, and 6:5, all internally downsampled, which is a great upgrade and something people have been asking for. However, if you need to shoot ProRes HD, the original VENICE is going to be the way to go, as there is no option available for that in the VENICE 2. The camera has 2 categories of resolution options, the full frame options and the Super 35 options, and while the 6K sensor crops down to 4K for a Super 35 area, the 8K sensor will crop down to 5.8K at 17:9, allowing you to use all of your favourite lenses without sacrificing a true 4K image. There are multiple aspect ratios to choose from. The full sensor is 3:2, but then you can crop down to 17:9, 239:1, 16:9, and 6:5. 4:3 will come further down the line with all the D-squeeze options available for anamorphic lenses. With the VENICE 2 essentially having an R7 internally now, that means the dual S/S slots from the original VENICE are gone and have been replaced with dual AXS slots. With this camera, Sony has also released a new S66 1TB AXS card. This is the fastest AXS card that Sony makes at 6.6 gigabits per second, against the previous S48, which stood at 4.8 gigabits per second, and it's also white, so it's easily identifiable amongst the previous cards. This is important as if you want to record the higher resolutions and frame rates, you will need to use this card and not the slower ones. These new cards are compatible with the original Venice with the R7 and will work with the AXS R3 card reader. The S66 cards will not be available in smaller sizes due to the limitations of the design, and with the release of the camera, Sony will also be discontinuing the 1TB S48 AXS cards. Another two features that have been removed from the original Venice are the ability to record XAVC and proxies. However, relay recording and cache recording are still supported, and the cache memory has been doubled compared to the previous camera to cope with the increase in resolution. The new 8.6K sensor can capture a range of frame rates, which will depend on which resolution, aspect ratio, and flavour of XOCN you are recording in. Here's a quick list of the available frame rates and resolutions. When using the 6K sensor block in the Venice 2, you'll be able to capture the same formats and frame rates in XOCN as you can in the original Venice. However, you'll no longer need to purchase the high frame rate license, as it will now be included with the new camera. Although you will still need licenses for full frame and anamorphic. This is one area of the camera where I can see people wanting to get slightly more. For example, 48 FPS in anamorphic could be a little short for European users. The ND system is built into the sensor block and is the same for the new 8.6K sensor as the original 6K sensor, featuring full spectrum NDs from clear all the way through to 8 stops in 1-stop increments. Sony really thought through the design of this system, with two rotary discs which stack in front of each other in order to achieve the desired stop. Kudos to Sony here, and it's great to see it continue, as it's been a dream to use over the past few years. Being able to finally adjust your stop to that degree without any IR pollution and without creating any unwanted shifts in colour like with LCNDs is great. You can control the ND in the same way, either through the panel on the assistant side of the camera or the operator's side controls. There's also the option to control this remotely in a number of ways. With the original Venice staying on the market and the price staying the same also, understanding the difference between the two is going to be crucial for not only operators but also producers and rentals. Luckily the cameras are very similar, so there won't be a steep learning curve as the form factor, I/O, menu system and workflow will give a similar user experience to the existing system. Colour reproduction is also synced between the two sensors, and as they both use sgamma3.cine and slog3 at their base, they should be fairly quick to match if deployed together. Though there are plenty of similarities between the Venice and the Venice 2, there are also some subtle differences. I/O is pretty similar overall, but we can see that the Ethernet port has now moved onto the main output side here, and the 12V 4-pin HiROS has been replaced with a 2-pin LEMO. We also now have an internal microphone for capturing scratch audio, which could be handy, and it was quite a simple omission from the original system. Sony claims that the Venice 2 is a lower power consumption camera, but this is only the case when using the 6K sensor, where it consumes roughly 15 watts less than the original's 83 watts. However, when you use the new 8.6K sensor, the camera can max out at roughly 105 watts, which makes it quite thirsty. If running off V-mount batteries, we're going to recommend batteries that are capable of a higher power draw to give enough headroom for accessories to avoid brownouts. The Ethernet port, which can be used to control the camera via LAN, has moved from the left-hand side of the camera to the right-hand side of the camera, just underneath the BNCs. This is a much more logical place for it to sit than the position on the original Venice. The SDIs and what they can do has also changed a little. You can output 4K from SDI1 and SDI2, as well as HD out of SDI3 and SDI4 simultaneously. You can also have a 3D LUT applied while outputting 4K, and can even apply a LUT across all outputs simultaneously now. SDI1 and SDI2 are no longer locked to log. EI is also now applied to the output of SDI1 and SDI2, as well as when shooting ProRes internally. However, this cannot be turned on or off for those that have gotten used to the way the previous system worked. Zoom to fit is a new feature that will be handy to use when shooting 8K 3x2. It zooms the outputs into a 17:9 or a 16:9 frame so you can fill your monitor depending on its aspect ratio. At release, this is only available while shooting in 3x2, but will also be available while shooting anamorphic in a future update. There have also been a range of software tweaks that have been the result of feedback from end users, so let's quickly fly through them. While the original Venice does have false colour, Sony have added a false colour info page, which breaks down all of the colours into the different IRE percentages for Sony's false colour in case you need to quickly remind yourself while on set. Sony seem to be thinking more about colour managed workflows with this release, as in the project menu you now have access to ACES CCT. LUTs, art files and CDLs no longer need to be transferred to the camera via an SD card and can now be remotely transferred to the camera over the network, either via Wi-Fi or hardwired to the Ethernet port. On top of this, there will be the capabilities in the future to live grade remotely and have the CDLs embedded in the clip metadata through third-party software, which is a welcome addition to the camera to avoid any expensive additional boxes. A small but useful addition is the new record indicator option in the overlays menu. This will disable all information either in the viewfinder, monitor or SDI outputs, and only show a record icon once the camera is rolling, to avoid any unwanted distractions. It's currently unconfirmed whether some of these software changes will be available in the original Venice yet, but they're welcome changes to the new camera. The physical design of the camera is pretty similar to that of the original Venice. However, there are some minor changes and major changes. It has the same finish and overall design of the Venice, and pretty much the exact same button layout apart from the moved slot select button due to the card slot change. There are also 4 new threads on the right hand side of the camera for future accessories. With the R7 now being internal, the camera is a bit longer than the original Venice without the R7 attached, but when compared to the Venice with the R7 attached, it is roughly 44mm shorter and around 500 grams lighter at 4.3 kilograms. The bottom of the camera has seen a change since the original Venice. Instead of curving in, the Venice 2 is flat at the same level as the front of the body now. This means that base plates may or may not work. As soon as we get a camera into our Newman House location, we'll be able to test this thoroughly, and I'm sure all the usual rigging brands will clear up whether or not their accessories will work as soon as possible too. We can also see new intake vents at the bottom here. This is to help cool the AXS cards now that they are internal to the camera. The original Venice did a great job at keeping cool and quiet while shooting, so hopefully this has been carried over to the Venice 2. The lens mount system hasn't changed too much from the original Venice, so you have the same PL mount that sits over the top of a locking E mount. This gives the camera the same excellent lens versatility, but it has seen one massive improvement: captive screws on the PL mount. I cannot tell you how fantastic this is to see. As someone who has nearly lost the mount screws on more than one occasion, this will make switching to an E-mount lens or adapter or to Kipiti's LPL mount so much less stressful. The camera has the same 3-pin Fisher ports at the front and rear and will work in the same way as the previous camera, where 1 amp will be shared by them if powering via 12 volt and 2 amps will be shared if powering via 24 volt. We also wanted to check the boot up time of the camera. I can't remember exactly how long the Venice takes, but the Venice 2 took roughly 7 seconds to fully boot, and this is decently quick for a cinema camera. As with any new camera release, it will take a bit of time for the back end to catch up with the front. Sony has confirmed that the SDK has gone out to all of the major NLEs, and that they had processed the 8.6K footage through beta versions of Resolve and Baselight. They had also said that a new version of Raw Viewer will be available soon, and it will be much easier to extract embedded Zeiss extended data for VFX workflows. The Venice 2 as well as the new AXS media should be shipping in February 2022, and currently the Venice 2 doesn't have a confirmed price point. When we get that though, we will put it into our pinned comment below. Sony has managed to squeeze every bit of performance out of the original Venice, so it's not surprising that they are looking to update their flagship system with more modern technology. However, we do think that Venice owners will be frustrated that they will need to fork out another large investment to experience the upgrades of the Venice 2, and one of the key features Sony promised with the original Venice is changeable sensor blocks. We really hope that Sony is also working on some kind of upgrade path option for existing Venice owners to help alleviate this. In conclusion though, Venice 2 looks to improve the honestly very few negatives that people have about Venice, and we are super excited to get a chance to properly shoot and test the camera. Let us know what you think of the Venice 2 in the comments below, and if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe even consider subscribing so you don't miss any of our awesome upcoming content. And thank you so much for watching.